going to talk about that. Yeah, the question is, when is our next test going to be? And that's probably going to depend on how far we get tonight in class. What's happening is we're slowly running out of time. And your third test in here, which you actually have a total of 4 tests, the fourth test being the optional comprehensive final. Okay, so if you've taken the first 3 tests, and the third test, by the way, is going to be the Tuesday of the last week of classes. Okay, so if you've taken the first 3 tests, you've turned your paper in, you've gotten your final average, and I'm going to try to have those final averages to you about the middle, towards the end of the last week of classes. If you're happy with everything, you are finished with this class. Okay, you do not have to come back and see me again. But if you have a grade, I mean, maybe you, I don't think anybody's missed the test, because I've tried to work with you to make sure you don't have to take the comprehensive final. But if you have missed a test, or if you scored a really low test grade and you want to replace it by taking the comprehensive final, then that's going to be given the Tuesday night of finals week. Now, since our third test is the last week of classes, that means this second test is going to cover 3 chapters. And so we'll either have to have it next week or the week after, but we'll probably have to start some material in between that's going to be on the third test. That makes sense? And how that works to get everything in. So I wanted to point out a couple of things just to make sure. I don't know if you probably haven't had a chance to look at it, or maybe you didn't want to look at it. But if you go to the integrity recording section, you will see what I covered last week. Okay, so it was just like you were in class. I recorded it in my office. I went through the chapter 9 PowerPoint slides. So here, okay. So I went through the mortgage market. So I went through all of this information. What is a mortgage? Mortgage characteristics, the 4 major types of mortgages. What are things like collateral, a down payment, the difference between insured versus conventional mortgages, fixed rate versus adjustable, what's a discount point, what's an amortization schedule. And I just went through all of this. And we're going to actually go through some of this tonight in terms of mortgage payments, points versus no points, how to use the amortization schedule, that type of thing. And then the last part of this, and this is where it gets a little technical, is secondary mortgage markets. So I went through and discussed what are the 3 major forms of securitization. Securitization is just when you package a group of mortgage loans, which a mortgage loan, all that is a loan on a piece of property. Okay, so whether it's a house, a farm, an apartment building, whatever. But when lenders make mortgage loans, a lot of times they can't afford to keep them on their balance sheet, because mortgages tend to be for 10 years, 20 years, even 30 years. And most banks can't finance a 30-year loan with 6-month certificates of deposit. Okay, there's just too much interest rate risk there. So they sell them. They sell them into the secondary market. And that's what this is referring to, the different types of mortgage securitization. So securitization is when a group of loans that are similar are packaged together. So let's say that your bank, you make $100 million worth of mortgage loans. You take that package and you sell that package. Now you're going to sell it to somebody like Ginnie Mae. You may know what the letters GNMA stand for. By test time, you should, okay? The Government National Mortgage Association, or Fannie Mae, Federal National Mortgage Association, or Freddie Mac. I mean, those are some names that you're going to need to be familiar with. But what they do is they package them into investment bonds, for the most part, using financial engineering. And so these are the different types of bonds that mortgages are packaged in. Now, once they're packaged, these bonds are sold. And guess who a major purchaser of these mortgage-backed bonds are the topic of this class. Okay, banks. Banks invest heavily in mortgage-backed securities. And the reason we call them mortgage-backed securities are because they're securities, they're investments, they're bonds backed by home mortgages. Now, the way it works is, and I'm simplifying this a lot, but the way it works is when I make my house payment, part of it goes to principal, part of it goes to interest. And if my mortgage is in the secondary market, when I make my house payment, that payment essentially flows through several channels until it gets to the investor who purchased the mortgage-backed bond that is secured by my mortgage among hundreds of other mortgages. Now, everything works fine as long as people make their house payments. But when the cash flow to make the interest payments on the mortgage-backed bonds and to pay the principal on the mortgage-backed bond, when all of that stops, or a lot of it stops, then you have problems. So, and I talked about this in the recording in 2006, 2007, 2008, whenever we were having so many financial problems. If you think about this for a minute, let's say you're a bank and you're making home loans. So you made thousands of mortgage loans. You're trying to compete with every other bank in your area. So you're offering low interest rates, historically low interest rates. You're loaning really high loan-to-value percentages. 100% loan-to-value, which means if you your customer buys a $200,000 home, you loan $200,000 against that home. They're not putting anything down. They don't have a down payment. Some lenders were loaning up to 110% of the cost of a home. So if you bought a $200,000 home, the bank would loan you $220,000 to buy that home. That's ignorant, okay? You don't have to be a banker. You don't have to have 25 years of banking experience to know that's probably not a good thing to do. Now, for the customer, it's fantastic because they can take that extra $20,000 and put in a swimming pool or buy furniture or new landscaping or whatever. And as long as real estate prices rise, which, I mean, we all know real estate prices always go up. Real estate's never a bad investment because the price of real estate is always going to go up. Is that correct? Not in 2008 it wasn't. Because those homes that were worth $200,000 at one point, 6 months to a year later, could have been worth half that. So you've got a $200,000 loan as a bank against a house that's worth $100,000. Your problems are only beginning as a lender. Because then the people that own the house, they're sitting there thinking, wow, what a mistake did we make. We paid $200,000 for this house. Now if we wanted to sell it, we could get at the most $100,000 for it. Why are we making our house payments? Why don't we just leave? Just pack up and leave. And let the bank worry about selling the house, getting their money back, whatever it might be. So that's what people did. And again, if 1 or 2 people did that, that's okay. If 100 people did that, that's okay. The bank could survive that. But when thousands of people pack up and leave their house, leave the keys on the counter, and let the bank worry about it, the bank has to now sell these thousands of houses that it has a $200,000 loan against that's worth maybe $100,000. And when it becomes a foreclosed property, guess what happens to the value once again? It goes down further because nobody wants to pay full price for a bank foreclosure. Am I right? Anybody in here bought houses, know something about real estate? So if you see a foreclosed house, you're like, wow, I'm not paying full price for that. There's got to be something wrong with the house. So I want it at a cheaper price. So maybe they sell it for $85,000. So now they've lost $115,000 on one house. And again, one house is fine. Thousands of houses on your portfolio, you can't withstand that. Now, that's the real estate problem. Keep in mind, banks invested heavily in mortgage-backed securities. So since people weren't making their house payments and they were walking away from these houses and banks were losing money on these loans, guess what happened to the value of the bonds secured by these houses? They became worthless. Because if nobody's making their house payment, there are no cash flows flowing through to make the interest payments or the principal payments to the bondholders. So banks got smacked again by making bad investments in mortgage-backed securities secured by the houses that they were also losing money on. So you can see why we've had over 500 bank failures since 2008. It was sort of a perfect storm coming together. If real estate prices had dropped and that was it, that's fine. If we had been in the middle of a major recession and that was all, that's fine. If we hadn't used so much financial engineering to create these exotic investments like CMOs, mortgage-backed bonds, and other types of mortgage-backed securities, that's fine. Banks would have been okay. But when all three of those hit at the same time, it was a worst-case scenario, something that nobody would have ever predicted would happen. And so that's what happened when you see these things, pass-throughs or CMOs or whatever, and this kind of goes into quite a bit of detail of kind of how they work. Then, you got strips, interest-only strips, principal-only strips, mortgage-backed bonds, etc. So, again, that's probably an hour and 15 minutes worth, I'm guessing, something like that, hour and a half recording. So you need to be sure to take a look at that, okay? Take a close look at that. Now, this is chapter 9 in your book. The handout that you have is chapter 7 from a different textbook. But I think it's important, and I understand it's not perfect, and if you're looking through it, the print's kind of small, and it's sort of hard to read. But this is what we're going to focus on part of tonight anyway, is some examples in here. I sent you a notice earlier to be sure to bring your financial calculator. I do have one available up here if somebody needs to borrow one. Where are the extra handouts? Anyone need to borrow a calculator? No takers? Okay, so if you start looking through this, again, you're going to see a lot of information, and it's going to start talking about discount points, which is, let's see, where we're going to start with this. Discount points start on page, I don't know, the page is cut off, whatever page. It's 1, 2, 3, the front of the 4th page. It talks about discount points in the middle of the page. And when you review the video that I recorded, it will tell you that when we talk about discount points, what we're talking about is simply if a person obtains a mortgage, they want to buy a house, points are simply ways to buy down the interest rate. So the more points you pay, the lower your interest rate is going to be. Now, the way it works is one discount point is equal to 1% of the loan's value. So one discount point is equal to 1% of the loan's value. So if you're borrowing, for example, $100,000, 1 point is going to be 1% of that, or $1,000. So if you pay $1,000 up front, you're going to get a lower interest rate. If you pay 2 points up front, which would be $2,000, then you'll get an even lower interest rate, and so on and so forth. You can pay 4, 5, 6 points if you want to. The issue becomes, where do you stop? where does it, where does paying the extra points not pay for itself with the lower interest rate, which is associated with the lower monthly payment? So that's what we're going to discuss tonight. Now, I want to make sure that everybody is comfortable, and I'm sure you remember it perfectly. But I want to make sure that you are comfortable using your financial calculator, calculating loan payments. So, okay, so here is your financial calculator. Okay, and you'll notice this one, every time I unplug it, it goes back to 2 decimal places. So if yours is not set to 4 decimal places, you can do that. We're going to use the format key right above the decimal here. So if I press the second key and then the decimal, you can see I'm set to 2 decimal places. I want to change to 4, so 4 and then enter. And now I'm set to 4 decimal places. Now, a couple of other things. One, as you're working through this, typically if we're dealing with a house payment, your payments are going to be monthly. So you want your calculator set on 12 payments per year. So to check that, that's going to be right above the I/Y key. So if I press the second key in the I/Y, you can see I'm currently set on 1 payment per year. I want to change that to 12. So I'll put in 12, press the enter key to lock it in, and now press the clear button in the bottom left-hand corner. And then finally, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this, and let me kind of take a survey. How many of you feel very comfortable working with your financial calculator? Raise your hand. Okay, so quite a few of you. Okay, good deal. The last thing to do is, this is for people who maybe haven't worked with theirs a lot. After every calculation, time value money calculation, your inputs are still in your calculator, so you want to clear them out. Just pressing your clear button in the bottom left-hand corner does not erase those inputs. So what you have to do is you have to, in this order, once you're showing zeros, press the second key, and right above the future values key, it says clear time value of money. Then press the second key again, and in the bottom left-hand corner, clear work. And now you're ready to work another problem. Now, what I want to do is, so you can kind of go back and take a look at what we did and follow along if you have questions or if you're studying, is starting on page, actually it does show a page number. It starts on page 201, but you can actually, example 7-1, but you can actually see it on page 202, the numbers that we're going to use. So this is calculating a mortgage payment, calculating a house payment. So you'll see in the example, it says you plan on purchasing a $150,000 home using a 30-year mortgage obtained from your local bank. The mortgage rate is 8% with 0 points. In order to forego the private mortgage insurance, you will make a down payment of 20%. So that's going to be 20% of $150,000 is going to be $30,000. So you're going to borrow the difference. 150 minus 30, you're going to borrow $120,000 for 30 years at 8% interest. So in looking at this, let's see, we don't want this yet. So let's just go ahead and put the information down. So your inputs are going to be your present value So those will be your inputs. You're set on 12 payments per year. You're borrowing $120,000, and your interest rate is 8%. So I'll just go ahead and enter this information in. We'll put in 120, so 120,000. Press the PV key, present value. 360 is going to be your in, and 8 is going to be the I/Y, interest per year. Now we want to compute the payment. So this tells you that each month you're going to write a check or have this deducted from your account, $880.52. And keep in mind also that this is principal and interest only, P&I. A lot of times if you borrow money to purchase a property, your bank may set up what's called an escrow account. An escrow account is simply where they make you put a portion of your homeowner's insurance and your property taxes each month into that account so it goes in with your house payment. So let's say, for example, and I'll just use round numbers, let's say your insurance is $2,400 per year, your taxes are $2,400 per year. That's $4,800 total. Well, the lender, they may just let you make this payment per month, and whenever the taxes are due and whenever the insurance is due, just let you pay it. But a lot of times people don't have that kind of money. So what, for example, what if you don't have the $2,400 to make the insurance payment when it's due, you let it lapse, and the day after the insurance lapses, your house burns down. Well, guess what's securing this bank's $120,000 loan? Your house that has no insurance, that is now basically worthless because it's burned to the ground. So that's why a lot of times they would take the $200 per month, if it's $2,400 divided by 12, $200 per month for insurance and $200 per month for property taxes. That would be an additional $400, and they would add that to the total. So you would actually write a check for $1,280.52. Okay, but again, this has taxes and insurance with it, and what we're interested in our examples tonight are just principal and interest. But does that make sense? Kind of how escrow accounts work? Now, when we're dealing with a loan like this, this is what's called an amortized loan. And with an amortized loan, this means that a portion of your payment amount of $880.52, and it's going to stay the same. If this is a fixed rate loan, which typically most people take out fixed rate loans, your house payment is not going to change for 30 years. So if you live in a house, it's going to stay $880.52 per month. So as your income goes up, your house payment becomes percentage-wise a smaller portion of your total income, which is a good thing. Okay, that's what we want to happen. But as we make this payment, what happens is a portion of this payment goes to principal, which pays down the loan. A portion of this payment goes to interest, which is what you're paying the lender to use their money. And as you make payments, more of your payment of $880.52 goes to principal, less goes to interest, which is a good thing. But with a 30-year mortgage, it's a very slow process. So very small amounts increase in principal, very small amounts decrease from interest. Now, once we've calculated a loan payment, and did everybody come up with this, by the way? I want to make, if you didn't, let me know. We can get it fixed. Once you've calculated the loan payment, we can then also calculate an amortization schedule. So at the bottom of page 202, you see an amortization schedule. And what this is going to show you is, with each payment, how much goes to principal, how much goes to interest, what's the remaining balance after that payment's made, and it just keeps going. Payment 1, payment 2, payment 3. For this one, you would have 360 lines on your amortization schedule. Now, with your financial calculator, you don't want to calculate a 360 payment amortization schedule. Okay, there's 1,000 of them online that you can type in the numbers, print it off, keep an eye on it. Okay, it's much easier. But I do want you to be able to use your financial calculator and the amortization function. So if you take a look at this, okay, so we're showing our loan payment right above the present value key. You see the letters AMORT. So this is your amortization schedule. So with the loan payment showing, if you press the second key and the present value key, it's going to say P1. The P stands for payment. And if you press your down arrow key one time, it's going to say P2. Again, P stands for payment. Now, the way this works is, if you are interested in a single payment, so for example, payment number 1, if you want to know how much of this amount, how much goes to principal and how much goes to interest for just the first payment, we would set P1 equal to 1 and P2 equal to 1. And then as you press your down arrow key, it's going to show you the remaining balance, how much goes to principal, how much goes to interest, then it's going to take you back around to where you started. Okay, so you can't mess up in here. You can't get lost. The up and down arrow keys at the top of the screen here simply tell you this is how you get around within this function, and it's just going to take you back around. So if we set P1 equal to 1, now if yours isn't, you can just press 1 and enter. If we set P2 equal to 1, and then we press the down arrow key, it shows us that after we made our first payment of $880.52, we still owe $119,919. Of that amount, $805 went, $80.52, I thought that looked wrong. $80.52 went to principal, and $800 went to interest. So you can see most of this payment goes to interest. Now, what I told you was, as you make payments, more goes to principal, less goes to interest. So let's see if that's true. Let's take a look at just payment number 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to set P1 equal to 2. So 2, enter. And we're going to set P2 equal to 2. And then press the enter key. After the second payment has been made, you have a balance of $119,838. Of that payment amount of $880.52, $81.05 went to principal, and $799.46 went to interest. So there was 54 more cents went to principal, 54 less cents went to interest. That's right. You're well on your way to home ownership. Okay? It's just going to take a while. Is everybody comfortable with this? Remember this from Finance 330? If you had me for Finance 330, we covered this, although you might not remember it. If you had some of the lesser finance professors, you might not have covered it. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. Don't go tell Dr. Dura said that. He'll get his feelings hurt. All right. Now, we've looked at a single payment. Now, for a series of payments. So, for example, let's say you're interested in payment, the first 2 years' worth of payments for this loan. So that would be payment 1 to payment 24. Well, we would set P1 equal to the beginning of the series, P2 equal to the end of the series. So, if we wanted to know how much principal and interest has been paid after the first 24 payments, we would work our way back to P1. We would set P1 equal to 1, press the enter key, press your down arrow key, set P2 equal to 24, and then press the enter key. Now, if you press your down arrow key, you'll see the remaining balance after the first 2 years of payments. You'll see you have paid a total of $2,088 on principal, and you have paid $19,044 on interest. So, you need to know the difference between how to use the amortization schedule for a single payment or how to use the amortization schedule for a series of payments, like we did here.
So for most housing, 2 years, basically you're doubling
Did you say your doubling amount? We can take a look at that. Let's just set P1 equal to 1, P2 equal to 360. You can see the balance is 0. The house is paid for. You've paid your $120,000 back, and you've paid $196,986 in interest. Okay. Now, keep in mind. Remember, we're using time value of money. We're using an exponential function. We're using an 8%, I think, interest rate in this example. Now, what's going to happen is if we had a lower interest rate, for example, if we use 4%, then interest is going to make up it's still going to be a lot, but it's going to make up a much smaller portion because of this exponential function. And as we increase our interest rate, so as we go from 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 to, back in the 70s, which I was very little back in the 70s, but mortgage rates were 17, 18, 19%. If you don't believe me, ask your parents, may not remember, but ask your grandparents. Mortgage rates, 20% to buy a house. You could see the difference here because it makes a huge difference in the payment amount. So what that means is as interest rates go up, people can afford less house. And guess what interest rates are doing and are going to be doing over the next few years? They're going to be going up. So as all of you get into the house market, it's going to be really important as to where interest rates are because that's going to determine a lot of how much house you can afford. You can see the same house. Again, this is just very exaggerated, but if we bought the same house, it's a $150,000 house. We bought $120,000. And let's just say rates were crazy. They were 20%. You can see our, let's see if this works. Compute payment. You can see what the payment was at 8%. Look at the payment at 20%. If you could afford the $880, more than likely, this is going to be out of your range. So what you have to do is you have to start buying less house. So maybe you can't buy a $150,000 house. Maybe you can buy a $100,000 house or an $80,000 house or whatever the situation may be. So again, we probably won't see 20% mortgage rates again, although I try to never say never when it comes to the economy. But even interest rates that are 7, 8, 9%, which historically are pretty good rates, that's going to make a difference for a lot of you, okay, in terms of buying houses. Okay, so once we've done that, we can know how to use the amortization schedule. All right, let's take a look at, if you turn and this goes through, it kind of compares a 30-year mortgage versus a 15-year mortgage. And you've probably seen this before, so let me just kind of explain what this is telling you. A lot of times the two most popular mortgages are a 30-year fixed and a 15-year fixed. A lot of people think that if you borrow money for 15 years versus 30 years, the same amount, your payment's going to be twice as much. That's their reasoning. Okay, I'm borrowing the same amount of money for half the time, so my payment's going to be twice as much. Because of the exponential function and the way it works with time value of money, that's not true. It's not twice as much. Now, it will be more. Okay, so for example, for this house, your payment's probably going to be, if you finance it for 15 years fixed, it's probably going to be around $400 more per month. Maybe not quite that much, maybe $350. And that's beyond some people's payment ability. They may just look at that and say, hey, I can't make that extra $350 per month payment. But what you will find is if you run the numbers and use the amortization schedule, you will find that you end up paying much, much less in interest with a 15-year fix than you would with a 30-year fix. Okay? I mean, let me show you the numbers really quick here. I've already got this started. So let's go 180 as our N, 8 interest per year, compute payment. So this is your payment. So you've got the difference here. This is the 15-year fixed rate payment at 8%. That's the 30-year fixed rate payment at 8%. And if we go to our amortization schedule, and I'm just going to set P1 equal to 1, P2 equal to 180, which is 15 years, so your house will be paid off. The balance is 0. You've paid the principal of $120,000, and you paid $86,420 in interest. So by my calculation, approximately $110,000 less in interest. Same house, same landscaping, same 2-car garage, same everything. You just finance one for 15 years, one for 30. You've saved $110,000 in interest, and after 15 years, your house is paid for. That $1,146 per month payment is gone. So you have $1,146 per month that you can now do something else with. That's right. I mean, yeah, you can buy your motor home and travel around the country and never stay in the house that you spent all this money on, whatever it might be. But again, it's not right or wrong. It's just about choices. And a lot of times, not all banks or not all lenders, but some, and if you walk in just not knowing the difference, and you simply say, I'm looking to buy a house, I want to borrow some money, what do you have? And the bank says, well, we offer a 30-year fixed and a 20-year fixed and a 15-year fixed. What's the lender, if I say, I don't understand all this stuff, all this number stuff, all this interest rate, which one would you suggest I take? What are they going to say? They're probably going to say, you probably need to take the 30-year fix. A couple reasons. One, you can buy more house. You can keep your payment low. And that's all true. There's nothing untrue about any of that. But they're not going to sit down and explain to them, look at the interest savings if you finance it for 15 years instead of 30 years. Okay? Only your finance professor who cares a lot about you stands up here on a Tuesday night and explains that to you. Okay? So you can save $110,000 on your house purchase. Now, okay, so that's comparing it. Now, if you take a look at example 7-4, analyzing the choice between points and monthly payments of interest. I want you to be able to, let's go through an example of this, and then I want you to, we'll go through a practice problem. So let me find this. All right. So in this example, this is it, but let me kind of read through it. It says you plan to purchase a house for $150,000, 30-year mortgage. So the same thing we've been doing, same house. You're going to put 30 down, which means you're going to borrow $120,000, but for 30 years fixed. But your bank gives you two options. Option 1 says your mortgage rate would be 8%. And you're going to pay 0 points. Option 2 is your mortgage rate is 7.75%, so it's a lower interest rate, but you're going to pay 2 points up front. Because what points are, they're just prepaid interest. That's all they are. You're paying your interest up front. So the question is, which of these two is the best choice? And this is a very, very realistic example, something that you will face if you borrow money to buy a house. And out of the 40 people in this class, 39 of you statistically will borrow money to buy a house. There may be one person in here who's fortunate enough not to have to do that. Most people will. So this is what we have from this example. We've got the purchase price, $150,000. We've got our 20% down payment, $30,000, which leaves us with the borrowing, $120,000. And then these are our two options. Option 1, 8% with no points. Option 2, 7.75% and 2 points. Now, to calculate this problem, the first thing you want to do is you want to calculate the loan payment based on each of these interest rates. So that's what I've done here with option 1 and option 2. So notice 120,000, 360 payments, 8%. This is the payment that we came up with earlier over here. And then with option 2, the present value is 120,000, 360 payments, 7.75%. You'll notice that the payment is a little less per month. Because again, you have a lower interest rate, so your monthly payment is going to be lower. So I'll give you a minute to get caught up here. Once you've calculated each monthly payment, then you want to determine what's the monthly difference in the payments. Okay, how much am I saving each month if I take the lower interest rate? And so that's what I've done here. So you're saving $20.83 per month if you pay the 2 points up front and take the lower interest rate. Now, at this point, this is where your superior knowledge of time value of money comes into play. Because a lot of people would look at this if they don't understand time value of money, and I would ask them, okay, how would you determine whether you want to pay the points or not? They say, well, okay, let me think about this for a minute. With this loan, I get a cheaper interest rate, but I'm paying 2 points. So 2% of $120,000 is $2,400. So if I pay $2,400 up front, I get to save $20.83 per month. So what I would do is I would simply take $2,400 and just how many months would it take to pay off the $2,400 by saving $20.83 per month. And that would be incorrect. Why is that not correct? What's happening to the purchasing power of this $20.83 each month because of inflation? Going down, okay? So saving $20.83 today is not the same thing as saving $20.83 20 years from today. Because 20 years from today, $20.83 is going to buy you much, much less than it does today. So what we want to calculate is the present value of $360 $20.83 per month savings. And we're going to discount this at the lower of the two interest rates. Okay, so you're always going to use the lower of the two interest rates. This is your opportunity cost that we're using. So to do this, this is just the present value of an annuity calculation. Okay, so you've done 100 of these. Your payment is going to be $20.83. N is going to be $360. Your interest per year, or in this case, your opportunity cost is going to be 7.75%. and we want to calculate the present value, which you will find that the present value should equal, if your calculator is still set on 12 payments per year, $2,907.54. That is how much you are saving. Now, the way we're going to compare this is we're going to take the present value of the payment savings, if we pay the points, and compare it against what are we paying today if we want that payment savings, if we want the lower interest rate. So it's going to cost us $2,400 today in points to save $2,907.54 in today's money in payment savings. So the way we determine which is best is we simply ask this question: would we pay $2,400 today to save $2,907 today? Or in other words, if you offer to give me $2,400 and offer to give you $2,907 back, would you make that deal? Yes, you would. So you're paying $2,400 to save $2,907. So option 2, where you're paying the 2 points and taking the cheaper interest rate, is the best option in this example. So is everybody following this?
So you pay the 20% up front when you purchase the house?
That's exactly right.
And then you also pay 2% when you start making the payment?
No,
Or is the payment paid?
no. The 2% you pay at one time. So that's going to be part of your closing cost. So when you're sitting down and signing all the papers, you're going to, among other things, you'll pay for your appraisal, you'll pay for your title search, you'll pay for all this stuff, and you're going to pay $2,400 in points. And once you've done that, then your loan rate is going to be 7.75%. Yes. Yeah. Well, okay. That's a good question. We're leaving the down payment out. Kind of, you're going to pay it, but we're kind of leaving that out. So you're right. You would pay the $30,000 plus the $2,400. So you would pay the $32,400 plus the cost of the appraisal, the cost of the title search, the cost of the title insurance. So, and that's one thing when it comes to, and we haven't talked about that a lot, but when it comes to buying a house, one of the things that keeps people from purchasing a house is a lot of times closing costs are very expensive. You know, you pay $400 for an appraisal, $400 or $500. You pay $500 for a title search. And what a title search is simply, and I think I discussed that on the video, but if you buy a house, you want to make sure that the house that you're buying, that the land is free and clear of any liens. A lien is simply placed on the property by the lender. So if you buy a house, you're going to hire an attorney typically, or some title search company. They're going to go back, and they can go back as far as you want them to. Typically, it's going to be around 75 years. You can go back 100 years, 150 years, and they're going to look at each sale, each transaction, to make sure that that house was fully paid off when it changed hands, or that piece of property was fully paid off, because the house is just sitting on the piece of property. The lien is against the piece of property and any attachment. So that house is an attachment, a permanent attachment to the house, to the property. So even though the title search just covers the quarter-acre lot or whatever it might be, the house sitting on it goes with it. Okay, that's where most of the value is. So that title search goes back year after year after year after year after year. If it's clean, then they're going to write that up as there are no liens against it. You can purchase title insurance, which doesn't make a lot of sense, because what title insurance does, it insures you against the attorney making a mistake when they did the title search, for which you're paying them to do a good job. So I never have really understood that whole thing. But anyway, you can buy title insurance for yourself. The lender will typically force you to buy title insurance for them. So the lender's protected, the buyer of the property is protected. And that's the closing cost. Now, if let's say you buy a house, you think you bought the house free and clear, and the last homeowner, when they were getting the house ready to sell, they hired a painter to come in and do some touch-up work in the house. But they weren't happy with their work. So they said, you know what, I'm not paying you. You did a crappy job painting my house. I know I owe you $2,000. I'm not paying you. Well, that painter can place what's called a mechanic's lien against that property. And a mechanic's lien simply says, I did some work on this property. I wasn't paid for it, and I'm going to get my money somehow. So if that mechanic's lien is not noted and you buy the house, and then you go to sell it 5 years later, and they're doing a title search, guess what pops up? That $2,000 mechanic's lien. So that painter, when they filed it, they said, I may not get my money today or tomorrow or next year, but before they sell that house, I'm going to get my money. Because that mechanic's lien was filed before the bank filed their lien. So that mechanic's lien is in first position when it comes to who gets paid first, when the house is sold. That's an important topic. So guess who you have to pay off $2,000 before you can sell the house? The painter. That's exactly right. So those are things you want to be very, very careful of when you're buying a piece of property. Now, some mechanics liens are justified. There's nothing wrong with them. Others are just bogus claims against the property because these people want to make some money. So you want to be very careful of that. Also, when it comes to mortgages, I said the timing's important, because what's going to happen is when you borrow money, the lender is going to take your mortgage, they're going to go down to the courthouse in the county where the property is located, and they're going to file a mortgage lien against the property. It's public record. You can go to the courthouse in Callaway County. You can go up to the second floor of the courthouse. You can ask to see the property deeds and the liens, and you can spend all day there if you want to, looking at who bought what, how much did they pay for it. I mean, it's got the legal description, which most people can't make heads or tails of, but it's just, you can look at all of it. It's public record. But the reason it's public record is if you want to buy a piece of property, and this is where the attorneys go when they do a title search, they go to the courthouse and they start looking through these property records to see, is there a mechanic's lien? When the last person sold the house, was it fully paid for? You know, was it broken up into some kind of odd subdivision among children, and it didn't get the proper, they didn't get a survey done, and so nobody really knows what the property lines are. I mean, that can be the biggest mess you've ever seen. You don't want to put your pool in the backyard and realize it's 5 feet onto your neighbor's property, and then you got the headache of what do we do? Do we tear the pool out? Because the neighbor's got you over a barrel at that point. You need 5 feet of my land for your pool that's already built? I'll sell it to you. It's going to be real damn expensive, but I'll sell it to you. Okay? I mean, and that happens all the time. So when these liens are placed is really, really, people have borrowed money from 2 lenders to buy the same piece of property. The lender who gets there first has the first position. The lender who gets there second probably is not going to get anything when they try to get their money back because of this con person who borrowed money on 2 pieces of property. Okay, so that kind of gets into the legal aspect. Okay, so we're here. We decided option 2 is better. Now, for this example, we can actually calculate what's called the break-even point. The break-even point is how long do you have to stay in the house to make paying the points worthwhile. Because remember, this is a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. And if you're going to stay in the house 30 years, then we just saw that paying the points is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But most people buy a house, and they stay in the house approximately 5 years before they sell it. These are just averages, okay? You can look at different studies, and they'll give you different numbers. But most people aren't going to buy a house and stay there for 30 years. So what we're going to do is, and again, this is a time value of money calculation. We're going to enter the payment savings of $20.83. We're going to enter our opportunity cost of 7.75%, and we're going to enter the present value as a negative number of $2,400. And what we want to know is, what is the number of months it takes for this $20.83 payment savings to equal $2,400 at a discount rate of 7.75%. So when you compute in, you're going to come up with 211.73 months. Or if you want to divide it by 12, 17.64 years. What this means is, if you're going to stay in this house 17.6 years or more, it's worth it to pay the points. If you're going to stay in this house less than 17.64 years, it's not worth paying the points. So if you work for an employer and you know that every 4 years you're on the management ladder and you're moving up, and you know about every 4 years they transfer you somewhere else, and you've got to sell your house and buy another one, it would not be worth paying the points for this mortgage. And again, most people don't understand this. They just look at this and they say, wow, I can pay the points, and look how much money I'm saving over 30 years, not thinking, I'm not going to stay in that house for 30 years. Okay? And then they just do the real number and not the time value number, because it looks even better if you take the $20.83 times 360. It looks like you're saving even more money than you actually are. All right, so does this make sense, what we're doing here? Because again, it doesn't get any more real life than this. You're going to see this. And this is what drives a lot of people crazy. Smart people will give me a call and they'll say, hey, I went to the bank and they gave me these 4 options and I have no idea where to start. They've got points and no points, and I just don't know what to do. Perfect example. I've got a cousin who's a pharmacist. His wife is a pharmacist. They are really, really smart people. They live in Franklin, Tennessee. They were buying a house last year, or building a house. And he called me and he's like, can you help me with this? I don't know what they're talking about. I went to 2 different lenders. They gave me this information. He sent me the information. And he said, I have no idea which of these is better. I'm so confused right now. So I went through, run the numbers pretty quickly for them using something similar to this. It was a little more complicated than this, but almost the same. And explained it to him, okay, these are your options. This is based on if you stay in the house 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or whatever. And once you went through it and kind of explained it to them, then they're like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense. But they don't know where to start with something like this. All right, so based on this, let's see. All right. Now, you'll notice the rest of this, it talks about some of the same things that are included in Chapter 9. And so what I want you to do now is, wrong, this one. Before I forget, I'm going to, at the end of this, I'll show on page 218 and 219, there are some practice problems and practice questions. So let me read out the questions. They're all labeled questions that I think would be helpful to you in preparing for the test or in studying for the test. Okay, questions 2 through 8. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. That's on page 218 and goes over on 219. Question 11 on page 219. Questions 15 through 18. And question 20 and 21. Now, before you panic, the solutions manual is on Canvas, okay? But again, these are just good practice questions. But if you go to Canvas, the solutions manual with all of this is there, okay? But what we're going to do with some of the problems is I want us to work through some of those in class just to make sure that you have a pretty good understanding of it. Did everybody get those? 2 through 8. So it's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, and 21. If you take a look at it, they basically go through the questions, for example, they go through the slides that I went through recording for you. What is the collateralized mortgage obligation? What is a mortgage-backed bond? It just goes through all those definitions. All right, now, let me make sure this matches up. Let's see, 1. Okay, what I want you to do, if you want to, you can take a break for a minute, stand up, stretch, whatever. But what I want you to do is I want you to start working on number actually a couple. I want you to work on number 8 and number 11. Number 8 is an amortization schedule question. Number 11 is a points versus no points question. And it's actually a two-part question. Number 11 has a part A and a part B. Now, what I want to remind you of is, as you're looking at this, for example, Part A and Part B, notice for Part A, you only have 2 choices. For Part B, you only have 2 choices. A lot of times when you're looking at this and you're working this, you'll want to do something different because you're not happy with your choices. But these are the only 2 choices you have, so it's got to be A or B. A or B for Part A or B for Part B. And then if you can, for each one, calculate the break-even point. It doesn't tell you that, but calculate the break-even point for Part A and Part B on number 11. Set the 12 things. Okay, so once you do that, you're going to go to the amortization schedule. So press your second key and your present value key. Now, this is asking how much principal and interest goes to just the 127th payment. Okay, so you're going to set P1 equal to 127. So 127, then press the enter key, press the down arrow key, and you're going to set P2 equal to 127 because that's the only payment you're interested in. Now, if you press your down arrow key, it'll show you how much was the balance after the 127th payment's been made. Press your down arrow key again. Press it one more time. Okay. And then it'll show you how much goes to principal, how much goes to interest as you press the down arrow.
Can I figure this out just through the on the
Let's see. No, can't be done.
so then do I pay? Do I do it first time?
Because what happens
Oh, I
is,
didn't get the decision points at all.
what happens with this one is the present value with the present value of the payment savings, actually, I don't know, let's see. The present value of the payment savings has to be more than the points paid. If that's the case, you can't calculate a break-even point. In fact, with this one, the present value of the payment, no, wait a minute.
Would I be taking 2% of 92,000?
That'd be 920, 1840. Yeah, so that's your point.
Okay.
So you're going to compare, how much is what's the present value? Have you done that yet?
The present, no, I haven't had a present
Okay.
value.
Yeah. Got it? Do it? Yeah, that works. Just gonna be
Just for that month.
that
just for
month.
Okay.
I guess it'll be 127, comma 127. Okay.
Is that correct?
Yep. So that should be principal, I think, and then
And then they have another function for the interest.
and the interest.
It's right where you have the one.
Yeah.
So you just do the same thing. It's 25.
Would you mind showing her up here how to do that? I'll bring her back here. All right, we figured it out. This smart man here is going to show you how to do it. It's easy once you know how to do it.
Only question I have though is when I was watching that video. So whenever he actually did like the first payment, like whenever he had to do all this 1st, he divides 8% by 12. Like,
You don't have to do that.
you know how to do that? Okay. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure before.
Because, well, Let me make sure I came up with what is it?
611 is what I got when I just kept the 8%.
Okay, so the present value is gonna be 64,000, 8%, 180. Let me see what I come up with. Yeah, that's right. You don't have to. I don't know what he was doing unless is he might have left. What he was doing, he was coming up with the effective rate. But if you do it the way you're doing it, you don't have to.
Yeah, okay, so that's okay. So he just left that.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit. He changed it to 12 and then just. Points. It's going to be 2%. So we take 92,000 times 0.02,
Okay.
which would be 920, 1840. Yeah.
You're doing it right. Okay. Good, good.
Yeah, so just 1%. Eugenius has got this figured out.
We gotta work
You're not asking questions, so I figured you know what you're doing. Do what?
Yeah, we're gonna add that.
You have questions? They're figuring out how to do that, so they can show you how to do the amortization schedule. And it's actually, well, he can show you, but it's actually, once you get to it, you've got one function for the principal and then one function for the interest. So it's pretty simple. You have any questions? You just did this, so that should be pretty fresh on your mind.
As long as I'm getting my numbers right, I think I know what I'm doing.
Okay.
This one is P rate, right? Present.
Present value.
Yeah, times 28%. It should be the.
It would be, the down payment's going to be 16,000.
Yeah, that's the.
So 80 minus 16 would be 64,000.
Yeah, and 8% should be interest rate and should be divided by 12.
No,
No.
no. As long as your calculator is set on 12 payments per year,
Oh, yeah.
don't divide it by 12.
Yeah.
And then N is going to be
Times the.
15 times 12.
Yes, so I already get that. So if I use amount and if I want to get 127
You'd set-
and P1
You said P1 equal to 127
127.
and press enter. And then put that on 127. Enter. Now press your down arrow key. Is that right?
No, I don't.
No, that's not right.
I use a wrong interest rate.
Okay, okay.
So what does that mean? A P1 or P2?
P stands for payment. Okay, so this would be if you just want to know how much principal and interest is associated with the 127th payment, you'd set P1 equal to 127 and P2 equal to 127. That's going to give you the principal and interest for just payment 127.
The payment
127.
Yeah.
But if it asks for how much principal and interest was paid between payment 127 and payment 130.
130.
You'd set P1 equal to 127, P2 equal to 130. And it'll give you the total principal and the total interest paid over those payments.
Okay. So if the last extension should be from the 1 to the end of the year, right?
Yes.
Right. Should be
So yeah, it'll be 1, P1 is 1,
yeah, 1, P2 should be 180.
180, that's right. Yep. If they can show you how to do this on,
Oh, I know that guy.
where we went, do what?
That's what,
Okay.
that guy right there, used it before.
So you know, yeah, he can show you how to do it. Does she understand it?
Yeah, I think so.
You may have another customer. Then what? Actually, I'm gonna get him to show you, and I'm gonna get him to show him how to do it. Okay. I tell you what. Why don't you go back to the table? There's 2 seats. He just has to explain it one time. Anybody else with a TI 84? I'm trying to conserve his energy here. I only explaining it one time to everybody. Okay.
Now we're trying to figure out the previous statement.
Okay.
Where do we go from here?
Okay. So this is just the present value of an annuity.
360 and 15
You compute the present value. Yeah. I'm assuming that's the right. I mean, I'm assuming that's the right answer. Good question. It is because you have to enter.
I need that a negative.
Okay, it is a negative. Which you're doing? You're doing 11, where $10.
What are the
And-
other options?
Okay. So with this one, yeah. So if you choose option 1, the break-even point can be calculated.
Oh, okay.
Okay? There is no break-even point there. So to calculate the break-even point, the present value of the savings has to be greater than the present value. No. Where's the point? Here? The present value of the savings has to be greater than the present value of the points.
No.
It's not. So you can't do it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to work through number 8 really quickly. I don't have it up here. I do have number 11 where we can take a look at it, but number 8 I don't have it, but I'm just going to work it out real quick on the board for you on the big calculator. Okay, so this is just a loan payment and amortization schedule question. You plan to purchase an $80,000 house, 15-year mortgage. Interest rate is 8%, and your down payment is 20%. So it says first calculate your monthly payment. If you're borrowing 80, 20% of 80,000 is going to be 16,000. So you're going to borrow 64,000. That's going to be your present value. 180 is going to be your in, and 8 is your interest per year. And we want to compute the payment. So your monthly payment of principal and interest is going to be $611.62. Okay, after that, Part B says calculate the amount of interest and separately principal paid in the 127th payment. Okay, we're just interested in payment number 127. So we're going to go to our amortization schedule. Now that you have to have your payment calculated. Second, present value. We're going to set P1 equal to 127. And then press the enter key to lock it in. If you don't press the enter key, it's going to go back to whatever it was set on. Press the down arrow key to P2, and we're going to set it to 127. And then press the enter key. Now, if you press your down arrow key, it's going to show you the remaining balance after the 127th payment has been made. You still owe $27,232. You press it again. Of the $611 payment, $427 goes to principal. And if you press the down arrow key again, $184 goes to interest. And then if it'll take you back around to P1. The next part says for the 159th payment, how much goes to principal and interest? So we just set each of these equal to 159. 159, enter. 159, enter. Press your down arrow key. The balance after the 159th payment of the 611, 528 goes to principal, 83 goes to interest. And then the last part says how much total did you pay for this? So if we go to P1, we can set P1 equal to 1. Enter. P2 equal to 180. Enter. Down arrow key, it's going to be approximately 0, so off a little bit due to rounding. There's your $64,000 that you borrowed in principal that you paid, and you paid $46,091 in interest. So is everybody good with that? Comfortable calculating that?
So when you have two different point things, you're gonna do different ones.
Two different
Points.
you've got to calculate the difference between if you took that one or if you took that one. Okay, that's what I was saying, where you only have two choices.
Yeah.
This one or this one. So if you take option 2, you're going to pay whatever 2.5 points is minus 1 point. You're going to pay that much additional up front to get the lower interest rate.
So just do the difference between these two first.
Yep. The difference in points. Okay, now let's take a look at number 11. Okay, now for part A on number 11, you're borrowing $115, 30-year mortgage, fixed rate, 20% down payment. The first part A, says you have option 1, mortgage rate of 9%, 0 points. Option 2, mortgage rate of 8.85% and 2 points. So which one would you choose? So this is how much you would borrow, the $92,000. Calculate your loan payment, and then if you paid the 2 points, you're paying lower interest rate, your payment's less, and so there's a $9.90 per month difference or savings if you pay the points. Did you get that so far? All right. All right, so once you've calculated this and you've got the monthly difference, then we're going to calculate the present value of the payment savings over 360 payments. So that is here. Your payment is $9.90. N is 360. The interest, and remember we're using the lower of the two interest rates. That's 8.85%. The present value is $1,247.08. That's the present value of the payment savings. And the cost of the points would be the $92,000 that you borrow times 0.02, which is $1,840. So the way we look at this is we're simply asking, would we pay $1,840 today to save $1,247 today? The answer is, or should be, no. Why would you pay this much to save this? Because all day long, if you want to give me $1,840, I'll give you $1,247 back. Okay? So option 1 is the better option. Now, if you tried to calculate the break-even point, you probably got an error message on your calculator. The reason is it can't be calculated for this problem. The reason is to calculate a break-even point, the present value of the savings has to be greater than the cost of the points. And since we're not taking the points, we don't need to calculate a break-even point. So on this one, option 1 is better. That's as far as you can go. So are there any questions about this in terms of where the numbers came from, how I calculated it, anything? Okay, now the second one, this is what kind of plays mind games with you a little bit. Because the second part B says option 1, a mortgage rate of 10.25% at 1 point, or option 2, a mortgage rate of 10% at 2.5 points. Now notice, you don't have the option of paying no points. And that's what you want to do mentally with this. You want to say, well, okay, but what about if I don't pay any points? Well, you don't have that option. You just got 2 options. Pay 1 point or pay 2.5 points. So the point total, the point cost is we can pay 2.5 points or 1 point, so we want to know the difference between the cost of 2.5 points and the cost of 1 point. Now, before we get to that, these are your calculations for your loan payment. And so you can see there's a $17.04 per month savings if you pay the 2.5 points. And then once we've done that, we can calculate the present value of the payment saving. So you've got your payment, you've got your interest rate. The present value is $1,941.72. And so this is where it gets a little tricky. Because the cost of the points, remember, you're either going to pay 2.5 points, $2,300, or you're going to pay 1 point, $920. So the payment savings, if you decide to pay the 2.5 points, is you're going to pay an additional $1,380. Can you subtract what? I don't think that works. Say that one more time. You could, because you come out with the same amount. Yeah. So 1.5 points times 92,000 should be 1,380. Yeah, it'll work. So you've got 1,380. So you can either pay this. So what it's asking is, would you pay this today to save this today? The answer is yes, you would. So option 2 in this example is better because, again, you would be willing to pay the additional money to save $1,941.72. And with this one, since the present value of the payment savings is greater than the cost of the points, we can calculate a break-even point. Does everybody have that? This is the loan amount, 92,000 times 0.025, 2.5 points. And so the break-even point is going to be the difference, 1704, the payment. Your interest per year is 10%. The present value is 1,380 negative, and you're in. Now, if you don't make this negative, you're going to get an error 5 message on your TI BA2 Plus. N is going to be 135.39 months or 11.28 years. So if you plan on staying in this house less than 11 years, you would not want to pay the additional points. If you plan on staying in it more than 11.28 years, then you would pay the additional points. But keep in mind, you don't get the full value of the payment savings until you've been in there for the full 30 years. So if you decide to move out after 15 years, it's still going to be worthwhile, but you're going to save less than you would have for the full 360 months. All right, so questions about points, payments, or any of that? That's exactly right. Yeah, you want it because what we're doing is we're putting everything in today's dollars. So when we calculate the present value of the payment savings, we're putting those dollars in today's dollars, the present value. And the point, that's what we would pay today. So that's saying, would you pay the additional $1,380 today to save $1,940? And yes, since we're putting everything in today's dollars, we can easily make that decision. But if we weren't calculating the present value, it'd be much more difficult to do. That make sense? Yeah, you'll just kind of have to look at it, work through a couple of these, work through these problems, these examples. The problem is there's not really many there. So go back, maybe work through the example that we went through in class, work through this one. If you'd like me to make one up, I could, just for you to practice with. But you will see something like this on the test, okay? You'll see an amortization schedule question on the test. You'll see a loan payment question on the test. There's no secret to that. It's not a trick. You know you're going to have to answer one of these questions. All right, so are there any questions about Chapter 9 in your book, /Chapter 7 handout? They kind of cover the same thing. All right, now what I'm going to do, thinking about this, we have the capital chapter left to cover for your second test. So what we're going to do next week is we're going to cover chapter 10, I think that's the capital chapter, and then one additional chapter. I think it's chapter 15 maybe, which is going to be on your third test. Your test will be 2 weeks from tonight, okay? So we'll cover chapter 10, which is all your test material. We can talk about the test. We're going to have to cover chapter, again, I think it's chapter 15. We'll have the test the next week. I hope this is right. Somebody have a calendar? I just want to make sure this is right before I really mess you up. What is I think classes end on like May 5th or something. So what's the Tuesday before that May 5th? The 2nd? The 2nd? Okay, so the 2nd will be the night of your third test. All right, so let's start from today. Next week will be what? What the hell's today? 4th? Okay, the 11th. So the test will be on the 18th. We have 1 week in between there to cover 2 more chapters, and then the test would be the 25th. So yeah, we're good. We're okay. All right. So that's how we'll proceed then. Next week, 2 chapters. The test the following week, 2 more chapters, and then your third test only covers 3 chapters. It's actually not really that, I don't want to say it's not that, I don't want you to not study, but it's not as difficult as the material we cover over the first 2 tests. I will tell you the second test, you need to spend some time studying this material, watching that integrity video, working these problems. Okay? Second test is going to be chapter 7 in your book, chapter 9 in your book, this little chapter 7 handout, and then chapter 10, which is capital. All right, everybody. Oh, reminder, I sent out a bunch of job announcements today on Canvas. I've got 1 or 2 more to send out. It seems like banking jobs are just coming out of the woodwork right now, which is what I've been telling you. I think there's going to be a lot of demand for bankers in the next very few years because of everybody retiring. One of the jobs, I don't know, is anybody from the Fredonia area? Fredonia, Kentucky, not a very big town. They're looking for somebody to go to work for the bank because they're going to have a ton of retirees in the next few years, and so it will be moving up pretty quick. So I'm going to send out that announcement. Remember, tomorrow afternoon, Mason Hall, 4 o'clock, the financial literacy event tomorrow afternoon and Thursday afternoon. I'm speaking tomorrow afternoon along with Zach Dunlap, who's a local banker, on credit scores, credit reports, pretty useful stuff for a lot of you to know. We're going to give out some good prizes, 2 prizes. One of the prizes is 2 St. Louis Cardinals tickets for an April 17th game. They're $159 tickets each. So $318 worth of tickets that we're giving away in addition to some other really good prizes tomorrow. So 4 o'clock, Mason Hall Auditorium. It should be a pretty good program. So bring yourself, bring your friends. We want a lot of people showing up. Everybody have a great week. Be safe, and I will see you next Tuesday.